everyone! If you're new here, my name is Chris Hong and I'm an artist, and this is where I make art videos and I try to share bits and pieces of my life as an artist. So today I have a watercolor portrait study to share with you guys, and it's also going to be kind of a first impressions on this new brand of watercolor paper that I was using. It's by Global Art Supplies and I think it's called the Fluid Easy Block watercolor paper, and it's in a hot press finish, and the size is 6 by 8 inches, which is the largest I've ever painted heads on. I think in watercolor, maybe even in oils, I don't think I've painted heads that big. Wait, I think I have painted faces a little bigger than that, but definitely my first time in watercolor painting faces bigger than a 5:7 ratio. I'm slowly trying to get myself to paint a little bigger so that I can tackle a lot bigger paintings one day. So this paper comes in a block form, which means that it comes gummed along the sides, so you don't have to tape it down and you don't have to stretch it out beforehand, but it only comes gummed along the long 8-inch sides and not the 6-inch sides. I think they should have gummed it on all sides. I'll explain why later on in the video. And the last thing I'll mention about the paper before we get into the process is that this is not 100% cotton. I don't think it. Otherwise, I think they would list it and show it proudly on their packaging. So in my mind, that means maybe it's a lower grade, not quite so premium watercolor paper. It wasn't necessarily advertised as student grade or artist grade, but I think maybe it's closer to student grade than it is an artist grade paper. And the reason why I picked this brand of paper up is because it was a little more economical. I think this was $10 Canadian, which is definitely not as expensive as the premium brands like Arches, but I am always on the hunt for less expensive watercolor paper that I can use for studying purposes and for quick sketches. So I'll talk a little bit about why I picked this photo for my study and why I picked the kinds of photos that I do. And I picked this one because, first of all, she has a very, very intense gaze, and that's something that I really love to paint. I really love it when there's a strong shape made by the brow bone and the strong shadows cast from that. So the eyes definitely drew me in first, and her features overall are very distinct, I feel, and I could see the structure of everything, so it would be easy for me to study from. And I also like how her ears kind of stick out, so I definitely made sure to exaggerate that on my study. And lastly but not least, she has red hair and freckles, which I love to see in painting, so those were the main reasons for picking this reference image. And because this study is the biggest face that I've done in watercolor, I really wanted to make sure to have a very solid drawing to paint from, and I really wanted to make sure to portray her as accurately as possible. Not quite like photorealistic or anything like that, but I wanted to capture her most characteristic features and not end up with just a generic face. And I have the tendency of shrinking down the chin area because I tend to draw more kid-like proportions, and that's fine on most faces, but this model has such a distinct jawline that it just wasn't working, so I had to erase what I did and then had to really make sure that I was capturing that kind of underbite jaw line, because I think it's such a distinguishable feature of her face. And I'm really glad that I went back into the drawing to fix it, because it probably would have bothered me the whole time while painting it. So the first thing I noticed about the paper, I think, is that it doesn't dry quite as fast when you apply water on it. And you know when you apply water onto watercolor paper and it warbles a bit at first, but it kind of straightens itself out? I don't think this paper did that. I think it stayed warbly the whole time, despite the fact that it was gummed down, so it should have straightened itself out. So I didn't love that, but the paper did feel very strong and it felt very resistant to pilling, which is really good for me because I tend to treat my paper a little roughly in that I tend to apply the paint over and over again in the same spot multiple times. And the way that I render the edges out, sometimes I am basically dry brushing the brush onto the paper to kind of thin out some of the edges, and that can be quite rough for your paper. But since this paper isn't 100% cotton, I do feel like the surface is a bit stronger and just a little more resistant to pilling. So I do think this paper is a pretty good choice for those who like to paint in layers and are a little bit rough with their brush technique on the paper, because I think the paper can withstand it. Also, if you make a mistake, you can lift the paint off the paper without worrying too much about damaging the surface of the paper. So another downside of the paper that I noticed on top of the warbling of the paper is that the gummed sides really didn't stay gummed for very long. They came apart halfway through the painting process, which really defeats the point of having a watercolor block, because then it forces you to tape it down. But by that point, the paper has now warbled, so no amount of taping it down will prevent the warbliness. So that was really disappointing. I really do think they should have gummed it on all sides and used a stronger adhesive. Compare this to the Arches blocks, which will not come apart unless you use a palette knife to run through between the papers once you're done with the painting. I really think it's a bit of a missed opportunity, because what's the point of having a block if it's just gonna come undone halfway through your painting? It's not gonna keep it from buckling up. So I think for me, this is the biggest criticism I have so far of the paper. But other than that, I enjoyed painting on this paper. I think it was easy to control where my water would flow, and the paint dried quite predictably. As opposed to the Strathmore 500 series cold press papers, I think the edges on this paper, the fluid paper, dried much more in an appealing way and in a way that I intended, as opposed to on the Strathmore papers. And I feel like it was easier to draw with paint on this paper than it was on the Strathmore paper. And by that I mean drawing in or painting in harder edges to define certain shapes more strongly. I like to throw these harder edges into my painting towards the end of the painting when I've established all the major forms, just to pop out certain structures better. And I call this stage the drawing stage because it really feels like drawing, or just refining the drawing of the painting. Your edges can get a little too soft all over by the end of your painting, so it really helps to pop some of the edges out and make them harder edges to reinforce some of the structure that's been lost a little bit in the softer edges. I know my thoughts on this paper have been a little bit all over the place in this little first impressions video, but I hope you were able to follow along. Putting everything I said aside, I really like the result of this portrait study. And that may be because of the paper, or that may not be because of the paper. It might just be that I had a good day, or it might be that I had planned it a little better than usual and went into the painting a little more meticulously. But that's a really good sign, so I'm looking forward to testing out this paper more as I go. And so far, I would recommend it to others, but keep in mind that it does buckle quite a bit, considering it's a block and not individual sheets. So aside from the study, I'll talk a little bit about how my week has been. As some of you may know, I'm going on vacation this Friday, the 16th, until the 26th, which, by the way, is my birthday on the 26th. So I'm really excited for that, but it's been a little bit hectic to try and get everything ready for me to be kind of missing for 10 days. And that means that I need to pre-record at least one video for next week that I'm going to be away for. And I'm also trying to have some extra things that I can post on Instagram while I'm away, because I really don't like to abandon it for more than a week at a time. I know people will understand that I'm away on vacation and stuff, but if I can help it, I like to post fairly regularly, maybe every 3 days if I can help it. So I'm working on a backlog of studies that I can make a post out of on a rainy day. And they're great because they're quick and easy for me to do. And studying helps build up your skills and knowledge. So hopefully you guys won't mind that I'll appear to be in study mode for the next few weeks. It's really that I've been in study mode for a handful of days. I'm trying to get a lot done in a few days so that it doesn't appear to the world that I've gone somewhere. And I really want to treat this like a full-time job, so it keeps me accountable. And consistency is key when you want to grow any social platform. And I'm really, really committed to seeing how far I can grow my YouTube channel. Everything's been really encouraging so far, except for the fact that I'm still not monetized. I think I really signed up to do YouTube at the worst time possible. I've been under review since end of November, so that's approaching 3 months now. I have over 150,000 views on my channel already that are essentially, wasted. It's really quite frustrating, but despite this, I am still committed to posting here regularly. So it really means a lot to me that you guys are watching and looking forward to my videos every week. So with that, thank you guys so much for watching today's video, and I hope to be back with another one next week. So see you then. Bye!